Hello, everybody. It's nice to see such a big audience. Actually, I remember when we did the first seminar back in 2008, I think in Lithuania, about XP practices. We got about 30 people attending. So it's nice to see now 400 people. So you did a good job in organizing the conference. So what we're going to talk in this session, we're going to talk about agile modeling. And we think that actually people learn best from mistakes. And that's why we want to present this in this kind of manner, that we go from anti-patterns, we show some bad examples in modeling, which we think that is why some agile people think that modeling is not necessary in agile context. We think it is really. And we're going to present how to refactor these anti-patterns to comply with best practices, and we discuss a little bit of how this fits into agile context. So we are presenting the company which is called Magic Europe. So you heard the word magic, I think, in a couple of times in keynote sessions. And we also present a modeling product which is developed in Lithuania, which is called Magic Draw. How many people here heard about Magic Draw? Okay, almost everybody. So I don't need to tell much more than that. I can only tell you that maybe one interesting fact, that we have users even in Vatican. Even in Vatican, there are people using Magic Draw for modeling. I'm not sure if they are agile or not, but they're using Magic Draw. So the session will be given by two of us. My name is Šilingas. I'm a head of solutions department, which previously was called training department, and I work in this company since 1998, so 13 years now. I've been involved in many projects as a developer, as an analyst, as a technical lead, and so on. Also worked in a few projects which had rather agile context. And recently I focus a lot on consulting various organizations in different parts of the world. And in many of them, they have agile culture. And we consult them how to adopt UML appropriately and how to appropriately in agile context.
Yeah, and my name is Rokas. Oh, sorry. Can we check? Microphone. Okay. So my name is Rokas, and I'm solution architect in company Magic. Actually, I joined company 7 months ago, and in my previous company, I was working as project lead, developer, system analyst. So I covered many of roles in my projects, and also the previous company was, let's say, agile culture-based software development company, and I was involved also in improving the development process, and also I was in that company as modeling evangelist.
Okay, and we're going to run this session in some kind of a bit different manner than usual. So this will be kind of simulation of the dialogue, which we typically have in our consultancy experience. So I'm going to play the role of modeling consultant, which comes to Agile company to explain how to adopt models efficiently.
Yeah, and actually I will be Agile developer who is planning and trying to adopt UML modeling in their projects.
With some success and some failures.
Okay.
Okay, so before we jump into examples, we try to give a little bit of context. So so we talk a little bit about UML versus Agile. Maybe not necessarily UML, but I mean modeling in general. We apply UML. And then we're going to go through a number of concrete examples. So example-based learning, example-based specifications, and example-based work actually is I think a great way to achieve results. And of course we show how to refactor those anti-patterns to comply with best practices, and we'll try to summarize at the end. That's the agenda roughly. And I'm going to start by saying just a few words about UML. Maybe let's check. So how many people here are actually using UML in your work? Okay, not so many. Okay, so UML is actually widely adopted as a de facto standard for software modeling. And the bad thing about UML is that it actually does not specify a concrete method how to actually construct these models. And UML recently receives quite a lot of criticism for being too complicated and too difficult to apply. And quite often this comes from from agile context. In fact, what we think is that the typical modeler needs to understand maybe 20% of UML, maybe less, and that's enough for the actual responsibilities, for the actual work that they have to do in the project. But they need to apply it with a very well-defined method. So that's some kind of short introduction to UML.
And actually, that is while you are modeling and creating UML models and diagrams, we are concentrating more on communication. So we were highlighting like such an Agile manifesto. We see that ideas that we are more focusing on individuals and interactions. So we think that communication face-to-face is more efficient, and we're not wasting time to, let's say, to creating the diagrams and then sending to our colleagues to analyze that. Better we meet face-to-face and analyze our problem and go to solution. And also like let's say Agile evangelists say like Ken Schwieber, we mention it in the keynotes in some conferences that the better thing for motivation is communication face-to-face. So we are not thinking that UML can help here for us.
Well, I think you're wrong, because I think UML and modeling is about improving communication, first of all. You know, one situation I had in large organization, which actually very clearly defines that they're using Scrum, and this is large distributed organization. Mm-hmm. They ended up in a situation where actually people don't come to meetings, planned meetings, because they actually don't have any other thing to do than meetings at the end of the day, because they have large teams, they communicate a lot, but somehow this information which they capture in this communication is basically lost. It is captured maybe in textual descriptions, in some informal pictures that they draw, but you go to their actually wiki pages, and you can find 10 versions of informal diagrams which are all not up to date and all incorrect, and they have problem. They try to solve it with communications, you know, and they ended up with people not willing to actually communicate because they want to save at least a little bit time for the actual development.
But so actually you can look to the code and you have this information, so
well,
what's the problem for you?
I think code is not enough. You cannot really, not everybody can understand the code. For developers, maybe yes. So I think, you know, modeling and UML is not against communication. It's an additional thing which can help you to communicate. And models really can help. There is a famous saying that a diagram is worth, or a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm not saying that you can draw a picture for each 1,000 of words, but sometimes it is very valuable. Also, what you need to understand, it is not the way that you draw your model or a diagram and you hand it to another person and you think he can understand. No. The process of modeling actually is very valuable for communication. When you draw pictures, you draw diagrams. Actually, this invites you to ask questions much more than writing some text and reading some text. So I think models can help. So this is only about how to apply it efficiently. And you know, what I figured out in my consultancy careers in other companies, that Agile practitioners tend to not use UML because they focus on coding. And quite often a big picture is lost. They typically release some first versions, but they have problems if they evolve product lines or actually develop products which need to have a long life cycle. Mm-hmm. So our experience at least shows that code is not enough. Yes, there's a lot of value, and of course this is the major artifact, but code is not enough. And modeling is still valuable in large organizations to capture things like, for example, domain concepts, business processes, very high-level system requirements, high-level designs. And when you do these designs, this modeling, you have to communicate. It's not like you've done and then you hand it to another person. And the other thing is that actually, I think that UML sometimes gets this bad name just from inexperience on how to apply it efficiently. So you get this kind of bad name from common bad practices.
Yeah, what about bad practices? Could
well, you know,
introduce?
maybe I'll actually call them anti-patterns, because this is something which is more popular in literature. So I think there are a few anti-patterns, like for example, these 5 I think are one of the most important ones. So one thing is that people do modeling at code abstraction level. So they actually model the same thing that is in the code, so they duplicate. Then they also have 2 complex diagrams, which are losing the value of communication. They're difficult to read and understand. They misuse UML concepts a lot. UML is complicated. That is true. But you need a small subset of that, which I think you can still understand. Then they are not reusing model elements. And finally, last but not least, they actually don't have modeling conventions. They don't have style, how to model.
Okay, that's maybe sounds reasonable, but you know, it's only your words. Maybe we can take some samples, like from our project. And actually, we started modeling with UML in our project, but later we dropped UML because of too many details. It was difficult for us to maintain the model and code. So actually, we decided to drop that, but we can check our samples, and maybe you can comment that.
Sure,
okay.
Why not? Let's work on examples. Yeah, let's work.
So here's only a fragment of our data model. Actually, we are modeling with data model and then generating DDL, and then importing to a database. And also we found at the beginning we found that's very useful. But actually, when we started with versioning, and we had many changes in databases, so when we stopped having in the model database and also in database of structure. So we just dropped that modeling. So do you see some problems here, or?
Sure, I understand why you dropped it. You know, there are some issues in this kind of modeling. So basically, you're modeling at the same abstraction level as code. So you're duplicating information which is already available in the code. You are dependent on technical platform. So actually, if you want, for example, XSD, some XML schema definition,
okay.
I mean, this will not work because you're already modeling it very concretely for a relational database. And at the end, of course, when you tying yourself to a technical platform, you create something which is quite complex and difficult to understand, especially for non-technical people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's maybe some suggestions? What should be done?
Let's try to refactor your example, and let's see first of all what should be the good thing to do. So I think what you need to do is to raise the level of abstraction here. Let's take your example, and let's see what I think is not so good in this model. So first of all, you are very dependent on technical platform. In fact, you have this test question just because from test to question you actually have many-to-many relationship, and in relational databases you cannot do this, so you create an intermediate table for that.
So we need that. We generate
DDL. For technical platform you need, but for representing information model you don't. And I'll tell you later on how to get your DDL. So you don't need this. Now, if you think about this, each object has an implicit ID. So why would you model the primary keys, which are again technical platform details? The things like varchar, like I know integers with some precision things. These are also database types. Sounds very technical, and then also you have some identifiers which actually depict relationships to other things. So people can understand relationships; they are not so well understanding something which is called ID, that this is a relationship to another concept. So I think what you should do instead of this, you actually should you should get rid of those tables, because actually the same information can be represented in XSD, maybe in Java object, maybe not necessarily in relational database. So what I would do in this case, I would prepare a model which looks pretty much like that. So what you have here, you have many-to-many relationship, which you can transform later on in intermediate table if you want. Then you don't have specific database types. You have standard UML types. You have references to the actual types, not to some kind of IDs.
Okay, but I see you dropped many things, many details from my diagram. So how I can generate, for example, DDL from that, because I need to.
Yeah, you can do this. You still can do this because all this information which I eliminated is implicit. So what you would do with Magic Draw, for example, so you would create your abstract data model. Then you create a transformation template, which is some kind of simple VTL script. I can give you an example if you want. Send me an email, I'll give you that. And then you use our reporting engine, and then automatically you get DDL code out of this diagram without actually this information being in the model. Actually, this information is in transformation engine, and it can be reused.
So that means I can generate also XSD.
You can do the same thing for XSD.
Okay.
You can write another template and still use the same model for generating XSD. That's right. You don't need a separate model for this. Sounds good?
I don't know. What do you think? So maybe okay. I agree with that, but I will give you another sample. Good. So actually, it is not. It's only also part of this of my diagram. So it's there are some concepts and relations between concepts, and actually. We like to have, you will say maybe it's like kind of everything on one page style, but actually we want to have whole our model in one page and to find this related information, and actually we don't want to change something. So I think it's okay for us, but just okay, it's difficult maybe sometimes to print that because we need A1 paper size. But it's no problem. Our administrators managed that, so that's no problem. So what do you think? It's okay?
It sounds familiar. Actually, 3 months ago, I consulted a company which asked for buying A2 printer. They already had A3, and then they asked for us to come and consult them how to actually do modeling better. And in fact, you know, I have much better examples than this from my other experience. What about this?
Oh.
Well, you know, this is actually the actual diagram from one of our customers' model. What they did, they actually generated complete code from that, which was running. They had 50 developers working for 4 years in a project. And after those 4 years, they decided to drop modeling. And I understand why, because in this diagram, they have 450 actions and 950 control flows, roughly, connecting those actions. So it's, you know, it's a nightmare to try to maintain even this. I've been using Magic Draw for 13 years. When I saw this diagram, I said, can I say hello to this guy? I want to shake his hand. You know, I could not do it, even though I'm using for 13 years Magic Draw on a daily basis. So what you need to do, you know, you need, I mean, your diagrams are too complex. So
no, for us, they are not complex.
Maybe it is not for you. But if you show it to your customers, right?
Okay.
Do you know what the rule psychologists have? The psychologists say that the optimal number of elements that you can visually understand in one diagram are actually 5 plus minus 2. Try to see in what you have here in your diagram. So in fact, you know, this is a quite a large piece of information model. Of course, organizations have much larger ones, but let's take this simple example and say, okay, so this seems to be kind of, you know, typical university information like student, class, teacher, course, stuff like that. This seems to be specific hierarchy of subclasses for the questions and answers. Could be probably also shown in a separate thing. So if we take this, and now what we do, we say, okay, let's package those into two separate packages, like test information and university information, and the test, of course, depends on university. And then what you do is you have separate diagrams for each package. And what you do in a magic test, you actually you're showing then the test and assessment and question and answer in detail, in full detail.
Oh, it's here.
Well, all these things are actually used from the university. So I'm not showing the details. I'm just showing the relationships to them. And if you want details, you actually need to go to. Well, first of all, maybe I'll show you that for the questions and answers, you actually need to have a separate probably picture showing the subtypes, if you want more focus of what kind of questions and answers are supported. And then, of course, if you want details about the teacher, student, course, and class, this has to be in a separate diagram. And in the previous diagram, I showed just a reference to it without the details. So I'm hiding this information from this view because the focus is here.
So that means it's not the new elements?
No, it's reused. It's reused. I'm just hiding the information in the diagram. So, you know, if you split your large diagram into something like that, this is much easier to explain, much easier to understand, also much easier to maintain. And you don't need a A1 printer anymore.
How to print?
Yeah, you print separate pages, or actually you run a report which produces an hyperlinked text.
Okay, let's take another one. Maybe that's good. That's reasoning, but actually, when we tried modeling and we have chosen use cases. It looked very simple for us, so it's very good to understand. So we tried to model user stories and features. So for features, we have created some stereotypes to show that this use case is actually a feature. So I think this one should be already correct. What do you think?
I think it still has some issues in there.
Which issues? I don't see them.
Yeah, so the thing is, that in fact, if you think about the use case methodology in general, what they say that okay, we focus on understanding the user value, and we don't want to do the functional decomposition. What you're doing here, you're doing actually a functional decomposition, because you have, I think, you have just 2 use cases, and the rest is the composition on how this is implemented in various features.
Mm-hmm.
So, the issues is that, in fact, you have some inconsistency in modeling conventions. What you represent as a use case. You're starting to represent as a use case some functional pieces, which probably are more like operations in your components and things like that.
We created stereotypes.
Yeah,
features,
but it's redundant.
Understand that.
But it's redundant because you created an extension to UML instead of using standard UML things.
No,
so you kind of creating a new language on the top of big UML language instead of reusing a small subset of what is already there. So, and in that you're also creating some ambiguous understanding. Some ambiguous understanding because the other people might not understand what exactly this stereotype means and this decomposition. So what my suggestion would be that you need to really apply a consistent modeling method based on the UML subset. It's basically not so easy to choose this subset, but we can help you as consultants to do this properly. So if you take your diagram, which had this decomposition features, what I would do in kind of my modeling approach, I would say these are not use cases. These are just the features which help implement the use cases, right? And what I would do, I would say, okay, there are just 2 use cases. Take a test and view my profile to see the results from the student's perspective.
There are others features?
So where do we put features? So we take, for example, take test, which you decompose into features, and we say, okay, now for this one, I want some kind of scenario. I want a flow of actions, which basically shows maybe what the student does and what the system does, and then you actually putting those things into a workflow, right? So you're saying, what steps you need to take in order to take a test. So I think this is kind of more consistent. You more kind of compliant with what UML says rather than decomposing with use cases into features, which first of all was something that use case methodology tried to run away from. So you're kind of misusing the concept a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another sample. Actually, such a diagrams we created many, and what we did sometimes we have these meetings, and in the meetings, face-to-face meetings, we are creating something on whiteboard. When we decide to put that in the model, let's say to model that in UML, we create diagram, and what the problem was that we cannot maintain if we change something. Let's say we change some operations or some other elements, names of elements or structure of them. So what's the problem? We just waste the time to find each diagram and then to find these elements and to change in many different diagrams. So could you suggest something for that?
Yeah, well, I think you're having a problem because you're not reusing model elements in your different views. So what you need to then you have issues, of course. You have, as you mentioned, you have duplicated and redundant information in separate architecture views, and this is of course difficult to maintain consistently because basically what you're doing, you're having separate pictures which are not in fact interconnected together.
Yeah, but they need to have that separate pictures because we should show some like let's see some perspectives.
Yeah, but basically you can have that, but still integrate those things. You can reuse model elements and integrate your architecture views. Let me show you how to do this. So instead of this, where you actually had some things like, for example, you have just a name student, just a name magic test. So if you now decide to change the name of your component of your system, you'll need to go here and update your diagram. So instead of that, you should have some kind of references to those things. Probably those things like give instructions, show question, and register the answer, there should be references to some operations, maybe conceptual operations supported by the magic test. And then you're also showing something like show questions count, show correct answers count, show score, which sounds to me like a collection of data properties. For this last one, what I would do actually a data model. I would say, okay, I have an evaluation object which actually includes grade, questions count, and correct answers count. Then you could reuse that. Then what you would do, you would actually say, okay, this is my component representing my system, and it supports the following capabilities: give instructions, show questions, register the answer, and show evaluation results. And then what you would do, actually, if you can see this, so I'm referring to those model elements. If I update the name in one diagram, it will update it in all the views which are using them. I'm referring to particular capabilities of the component which are represented as operations. If you update this in the component, it will update elsewhere as well. And I'm just showing one conceptual step, saying show evaluation results, and I'm linking this to a particular object which actually has those properties. If you want to figure out them, you go to a class diagram and you actually see what they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Maybe I can agree with that, but actually I have a less sample, and I think this should be like we tried to let's say to refactor the same diagram of swim lanes. We tried to add them without them, and when we got some questions from our customers. I don't know why, but we said that we don't understand actually where is this workflow going, the main workflow, for example, etc.
I can tell you why they did not understand. You know why? Because you have mixed modeling style, and if you have this, if you don't have modeling conventions for the style, it's difficult to read and understand. So you are Agile developer. Do you guys have coding conventions?
Yeah, you can ask. Of course, we're using coding conventions.
You're very strict
on about quality of code,
Right. So why don't you have modeling conventions then? I think you should actually bring.
For you, huh?
Yeah, I think you need to bring your agile practice from coding to modeling as well if you want to get value from that. So you need to establish modeling conventions. So what you did here, I can mention a few things which are not so good. So maybe first of all, I would like to ask you. So do you like skiing?
Yeah, it's very good thing for leisure for me. Yeah.
So you do some slalom thing here. So no, this thing is called slalom. So you actually what you're doing, you're trying to kind of maximize your use of space here, and then what happens? Your primary scenario of this workflow is lost. The person who reads cannot understand where is the main flow and actually what are the alternatives and things like that. So this thing actually makes it more complicated to understand. The other thing is you use in activity diagrams, you should have some kind of conventions like if this is an action, it should start from verb. Now you say just break, which is basically saying you probably need to say something like take a break or take a pause. So there should be a consistent convention of how you name things. Then, in fact, psychologists also say that if you look into a diagram and you look several elements and some of them are bigger, then the bigger elements attract more attention. So if you do a nice activity diagram, actually all your actions should be the same size, the same for the decision elements. So you should keep your elements the same size. So if I would refactor your diagram like this, it would have a very clear primary scenario. It would actually have alternative scenarios going to the sides, and you can see that actually the sizes of all the similar elements like decisions and actions, they are similar, right? So you have a consistent style which helps to understand, to read your diagram and understand it much better.
What's more? No, nothing. It's okay. I understand now. Yeah.
Okay. So also change the name and actually change the style of that. So maybe if I try something to summarize this, what are the best practices that you should apply? Is you need to raise your level of abstraction so that the information that you capture in your models is not duplicating the information that you have in code. In fact, in models, you typically should have much less information that you have in code, and you should try to be not dependent on your technical platform, because this typically couples your models with the code. So your models then are simpler, much easier to maintain, much easier to understand for non-technical people. Because as you said, technical people, they can understand the code and you can communicate using the code, which is not necessarily the case with non-technical people. And then for them, you can use the diagrams. Then you need to use several levels of detail, because really people do not understand and they are not also capable to maintain large diagrams. And that's why quite often they say, okay, we don't want to actually keep them up to date. We use them just as a throwaway model, which is something which you can still do. I mean, some models you can simply create for communication, while you communicate, while you ask questions, and then you throw away. So you need to understand which things you want to maintain as some kind of assets of knowledge which you want to keep. And then if you do this, then you need to raise level abstraction and use several level of details. Also, this needs to follow some consistent modeling method based on UML subset, typically. You need to integrate architecture views because the separate diagrams do not actually provide some integration capability. So the power of UML, the power of modeling is really if you integrate different architecture views into a single consistent model. And last but not least, you need to establish modeling conventions, and much like you do with the code. So you need actually to have this.
Okay, if let's say I agree with you, if it sounds reasonable, so actually what I need to do to apply this best practices and how to start in the team, for example, in our team, because as you saw from our samples, we dropped because of your presented anti-pattern. So how to start?
Okay, so you want to restart it and do it the right way. So
actually from scratch.
What should you do? You should define your modeling solution, basically. What kind of things are you trying to solve by modeling? And then you should really focus on a very small subset of UML, typically. And you need to establish a consistent modeling method, which is in line with your development approach. You can have a method which, for example, has test first, for example, modeling. Like you're doing examples first, and then your for example, sequence diagrams first, and then class diagrams first. So this has to be in sync with your agile practices and processes, and you need to actually apply a very simple modeling environment. Tools like Magic, they're very highly customizable. They typically look quite scary out of the box, but you can customize them pretty easily to actually hide all the things which you are not using and promote the things which you are using only. Rokas, do you hear what I'm saying?
Sorry?
What you're doing? Do you hear what I'm saying?
No problem. Just go ahead.
Okay.
No.
So what you doing?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm just started to tweeting the message because now social networks is very popular. So to tweet to my team, because I think I will be maybe modeling champion in our team.
Okay, and so you already.
Yeah, we can start. We will give a second chance for UML.
Okay, so yeah, that's what you need. You need a person who actually drives it, at least one. In large organizations, typically they have teams of people who are called maybe key users or modeling champions, things like that. So you need somebody to drive this, because otherwise the culture, there will be it will be not possible to realize the changes and really build the modeling culture. And then what I think you need to do, you need to apply what you found as a good practices in programming. You need to bring them to modeling as well. Things like conventions, like test-driven or test-first programming. Let's say you can do the same thing in modeling as well. You just need to simply migrate those practices to the modeling area. And I think last but not least, what you need to do is you need to share anti-patterns, because people learn from examples. You made some bad examples. This is your learning material, which is most efficient for you. This is your mistake, so you learn from it. It is said that wise people learn from mistakes by others, but I think you learn best from your own mistakes. And you cannot really adopt modeling as a kind of very, very short thing. It takes time. So I think you need to think big, have a vision how modeling can help a lot, but then you have to start with the small steps. And you need to adopt modeling incrementally, much like you build systems with Agile. So you do it incrementally.
Okay, and do you have some materials or something to read?
Yeah, so if you want to read more about that, of course there's a book on Agile Modeling by Scott Ambler, who is one of the Agile evangelist, who is actually a popular person, popular author, and a frequent keynote speaker. He has been to Lithuania before and spoke on Agile, by the way. And then, you know, if you want something like this example, so you know what? Actually, I have already done something like this presentation on BPMN models. So I have a paper on that. If you want, I can send it to you. But you know, you have your best example. So maybe we should work together to build to write a white paper, efficient UML from anti-patterns to best practices. Just take an example, show how to factor.
Maybe, if you help me.
Okay. So let's plan it for December 15.
Okay.
We did that last year as well. We didn't have time really. But now when we promise this in a large audience, I think we'll need to do it. Okay, so then the last book which I would like to recommend as well is The Elements of UML 2.0 Style. So maybe this is a good starting point for actually establishing your modeling conventions on how to really create models which are easy to read and easy to understand and probably easier to maintain. So I think that's about it.